Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you once again on this Wednesday evening to the airwaves of Salam Media, our listeners, our viewers on the various platforms of Salam Media. Wonderful you're able to join us on this Wednesday night, and Wednesday evening means in conversation with myself, Inayet Wadee. And once again, our focus is going to be on Palestine, as has been the case, relentless, non-stop since the 7th of October. And as we've unpacked developments over a period of time, taking a look at the latest developments now, the world obviously has been angered once again, slamming the United States for the ceasefire veto at the UN Security Council. And this move has been the third veto of a UN Security Council resolution that is demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. And while the eyes of the world is on The Hague at this point in time, where all the hearings, all the submissions are taking place, we've heard of the United States of America today, obviously stating their case as well. But the key issue here is, again, the genocide continues in Gaza, and we're also seeing the arrogance of Benjamin Netanyahu, total disregard for for what is taking place in the ICJ. He slammed the ICJ, and this is the reason why we have assembled a panel once again this evening to join us in conversation with myself right here on Salam Media. Unfortunately, Toby Cadman will not be a part of the panel. He has had to go. Something urgent has come up, but he has apologized. But we do have Shahd, Salam Media's legal reporter at The Hague. We've got Marcy, Winograd, coping activist, and we also have got the pleasure of Professor Nidal Sakar with us this evening right here on Salam Media. And it's time now to go across to join our panelists this evening, taking a look at the US veto and also Israel's contempt towards the ICJ hearings that are taking place. So without much ado, we're just waiting for my guests to appear on screen. Okay, there we have it. We see Marcy Winograd with us. Marcy, good evening to you. And we appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really honored to be with you.
And also to you, Professor Nidal, assalamu alaikum. You know, I heard you before we went on air, you spoke about Marcy being the pink coat troublemaker.
Yes. It's a good time to be troublemaker, actually. So I hope that we all can be more and more troublemakers until we get this war straight, inshallah.
Exactly. And Aisha Vahed, our very own Salam Media's legal reporter at The Hague. Aisha, assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thanks for having me.
Yes, Aisha, I'd like to begin with you because you are in the thick of things at this point in time. You have been following developments in The Hague in the last 3 days. And we've seen the United States of America, and that is going to be central to our discussion this evening with regards to the veto at the UN Security Council. But the United States today made their submissions at The Hague. And just, to give us an overview in terms of the last 3 days, what has stood out for you, Aisha?
Okay, so starting from the last 3 days, the first day was a very raw emotional submission by Palestine to the court. Very real, hearing about Palestinians from Palestinians, hearing about the international violations of law, about the genocide, about the right of self-determination to a people, all of these rights that are being denied to Palestinians. And I think the most moving part of it was the end of the submissions by the UN representative to Palestine, where he spoke about children being used as a demographic tool, children not being seen as children, and he actually broke down in tears. So I think that was the highlight of the day, or should I say that was the most moving submission of the first day, where the court and all the media members sat and listened to this raw account of the struggle, and all the Palestinian submissions were basically begging the court to do something, because so far every legal avenue, every UN Security Council or General Assembly resolution has failed them, and they were pleading to the court to give an advisory opinion that strongly sways state members to favor the self-determination of the Palestinian people. So that's just the first day. I don't know if you want me to carry on or.
No, let's just get Marcy in to the discussion as well, and I'm sure we will unpack a lot more that happened in the second and third days as well. Now, Marcy, obviously, Code Pink, and I know you've been relentless, non-stop since this genocide had basically started, and Code Pink obviously has had a lot to say. You put a lot of pressure as well, but just looking at the United States of America and the policies that it has been adopting, the veto, and also today with the submission that was made at the ICJ, it was clear that the United States says we are going to stand with Israel.
Yes, I think it's reprehensible what our government is doing, and I'm talking about both the White House and the majority of Congress in supporting by perpetuating this genocide in Gaza. And so as an organizer with Code Pink, I call on all the nations of the world to bring justice to the Palestinians. And by that, I mean we need an international tribunal on the floor of the United Nations to echo what we're hearing at the International Court of Justice, the highest judicial body of the United Nations. We need to start counting the votes. I think it would take about 129 votes to push the enforcement of the ICJ ruling to Israel to stop killing Palestinians and wounding them and provide massive humanitarian aid. It would take about 129 members of the United Nations to invoke the Uniting for Peace resolution to override what we anticipate will be a rejection at the Security Council on the part of the United States to enforce the ICJ rulings, and then to initiate sanctions against Israel. I'm talking specifically about banning imports and exports of oil, technology, and arms from and to Israel. That's what we need. We need to step this up.
Thank you for that, Marcy. And let's bring in Professor Nidal Sakar into the discussion. Now, Prof, you and I, we've had a lot of discussions with regard to the ICJ and looking at the legal action, obviously, that South Africa had brought initially, but also in terms of these hearings that have been taking place. And were we ever hopeful that something would actually come out, firstly with regard to South Africa and the case that they had brought in front of the ICJ, but also in terms of these hearings, because we've heard a number of countries saying already that the UN Security Council has actually failed once again. We all expected a ceasefire to be called for. That hasn't happened. That has given Netanyahu and his band of genociders the license to continue with impunity. If you could unmute your mic, please, Prof.
My mic.
Okay,
it's on. Okay.
That's
now,
fine.
we need to remember that this tragedy has been going on for 100 years. It was created by, quote unquote, the victors of First World War and Second World War. Not only they created the so-called this genocidal criminal organization called Israel, but they also created the whole world order to ensure that the colonialist, imperialist structure and gains are still in force and still in place. So if you're going to be playing at their own territory, where they already created those parameters for that territory and the rules and the laws, and they make sure that actually that you cannot get anywhere. So we know that for a fact. So what do we do in this situation? Well, as I said, that you always have to play at different fronts. One of them is play the game their way and then beat them in their own game. And then the other way is that you have really to resort to other effective means. So we know, for example, like that the world community, the people in the streets, the grassroots and so forth, where they stand. And they stand basically on the side of justice and the Palestinian rights. But then when it comes to the political situation, whether it's the international organizations, the forums, the international judicial system, and the governments, especially like Middle East governments, we find that they are all actually on the wrong side of history and on the wrong side of justice. So as historical and as important what South Africa is doing, and the ICJ and so forth, these for me are must do. However, we cannot really expect that they're gonna make the whole difference, because we know like those countries like the US, the UN Security Council, Europe, so-called Israel occupation and so forth. These people are basically like, they're set on breaking the law, violating the law whenever it doesn't suit them, and rewriting the law if they need be. Yes, the ICJ is very important. The enforcement of assuming that the ICJ came up with all kinds of like judgments, verdicts, and resolutions. What are the chances for enforcement of these when we know that half of the Security Council is actually main culprit in this war? So from that perspective, I'm not really undermining or trying to discourage any of the ongoing efforts. I think they're extremely important and they are must do. However, we need also to make sure that these by no means are going to be sufficient to deal with the crisis, and to make sure that we can impact what's happening on the ground and stop this genocide from continuing.
Yes, and Aisha, you've been following developments at The Hague, and just from what you've observed, how powerful and how compelling have these submissions been made, by the various countries? Well, we know the United States of America has made it very, very clear, but just looking at many of the other countries, and also in terms of compelling arguments that were placed at The Hague, from some of the countries, we've seen a lot being said. And just your thoughts in terms of these arguments or these submissions that have been made.
I think that if there's still a doubt in anybody's mind that Palestinian people or Palestine is under apartheid occupation, and if there's any doubt in anybody's mind that a genocide is occurring, international law violations are being rained upon the people every day, with the amount of submissions that have been made in the court, if you're choosing to believe that, then you're just choosing not to see the truth. Every single submission has been strongly in favor of the self-determination of the Palestinian people. There have been countless examples. I think about 3 states so far have likened the South African struggle for apartheid, but everybody, including the South African delegation, has made it clear that what the people of Palestine are suffering far outweighs even the apartheid struggle that South Africa suffered. So in terms of legal arguments, all the legal components for apartheid have been satisfied. All the legal components for an occupation have been satisfied. It's even been shown that the UN resolutions have so far failed. The UN itself also asked for this advisory opinion from the court. The only 2 states so far that have not been in favor of, or have been sort of on the fence, is firstly the US, which talked about mutual peace today, talked about the violent history of the conflict. So even the US, when they made their submissions to the court today, they spoke about a 2-state solution and the withdrawal of forces from an occupied territory, and how that needs to make sure that the security of Israel is first put in place. But they never came out and said that it's not an occupation. They never came out and said that the self-determination of the Palestinian people is not at risk, or the extermination of the Palestinian people is not at risk. Hungary came through. That was the final submission that was not in favor of Palestine, and they basically, their submission didn't even make sense. They spoke about October 7, about Hamas, and about how that's one of the most barbaric acts. This is not even what this advisory opinion to the court is about. And basically, they asked the court not to give an advisory opinion at all. So besides these 2, the US and Hungary, every other submission has been in favor of Palestine, and every single legal argument has been satisfied. And they've used articles from the Genocide Convention, they've used humanitarian law, they've used customary law, they've made reference to South Africa and Namibia, they've made reference to the apartheid struggle. There's absolutely no doubt that I think everyone is in agreement about the occupation, and everyone is in agreement that something needs to be done about it. They just differ on the means of going forward, basically.
Yes, and also to bring Marcy back into the discussion, just against what Aisha has been saying, and looking at the overwhelming pro-Palestinian submissions that were made at The Hague. And we see it on the ground as well. We see it right across the entire world. We look at, organizations like yourself, Code Pink. We see many activist organizations right across the world coming out in the millions since October the 7th. And this is the sentiment that is very, very strong on the ground as well. Yet, we find a country like the United States of America, and I think one of the countries actually blasted the US, saying that its veto in the UN Security Council was made it complicit in war crimes. And what more does the United States or the government of the United States need to know or to listen to, to stop, in fact, their support for Israel, but also at the same time, stop it from demanding an immediate ceasefire?
I think they need to know that the people of the United States will abandon Biden. In fact, there is a hashtag, Abandon Biden. And at Code Pink, we have posters, Genocide Joe. Right now, in this country, polarized country, some of the people who are most problematic are those who are telling us to vote for Biden in the next election that's coming up, right? Because the refrain is, but Trump. He's a right-wing fascist autocrat who wanted to steal the election, and we might never see an election again. And my response is, if we put our seal of approval on Joe Biden for 2024, we are approving genocide in Gaza. We are exporting genocide. LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, during the Vietnam War, his approval rating fell to 36%, and that's when he bowed out. Biden's approval rating, according to the latest polls in the United States, is at 37%. So rather than push him out, I would say to all in this country of mine, the United States, who care about democracy, who care about peace and social justice, to stop pushing for Biden. We need to abandon him. That's the kind of political pressure we need. And we're seeing it. We're seeing Muslims organizing in Michigan, a critical swing state that could go either way, and saying, abandon Biden. We will stay home. We won't vote for Trump. We won't vote for Biden. We will stay home, or we'll vote third party, but we cannot approve of this genocide. So that's the kind of political pressure I think that we need in the United States. Code Pink has been on Capitol Hill with our co-founder, Medea Benjamin, our other co-founder, Jody Evans, going door to door, visiting Congress members. Susan Sarandon, a wonderful actress, joined the delegation recently. And what we're hearing is that Congress is in a bubble, largely because so many of them take money from the from AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a huge lobby organization with a lot of money, who is pledging to spend $100 million to defeat primary candidates who don't support Israel, who don't stand with Israel. So that's the kind of influence that we are up against. But we're pushing back, and we have at Code Pink an ICJ delegation, a World Court campaign, where we have sent delegations in over a dozen countries to visit UN missions, embassies, and consulates to encourage other countries to step up in their denunciation, as we're seeing at the ICJ hearings right now, to denounce Israel, both its occupation and its genocide.
Yes, and also, Professor Nidal, when one looks at the United States of America, now we've seen a comment come out from the Council of American Islamic Relations, CAIR, and what they are saying is they are actually running out of words to condemn Biden's support for genocide. And also at the same time, when one looks at Israel and the accusation, when South Africa had brought the action, they called South Africa, in fact, Netanyahu called South Africa the legal arm of Hamas. But what Americans are now saying, and what CAIR is also saying, that Joe Biden should stop acting like he is Benjamin Netanyahu's defense lawyer. Prof, I think for some reason, no, I think we are losing you slightly. I'm not too sure. Marcy, can you hear, Prof?
I know I can't.
No, you can't. Okay, Prof, I don't know if you'd like to just log in and log out, or log out and log in and come back again. Hopefully we should sort the problem out. Okay, Aisha, let's just continue. While we're waiting for Professor Nidal to actually join us. I see Aisha's also gone off screen as well, Marcy. So I think it's you and I. But I think perhaps just like I'd like your comment as well. Okay, I see there Aisha is back with us, and Professor Nidal is connecting. So let's just wait for him to join us. Prof, you're back with us.
Yes, I mean, I've been in contact with CARE since over the last 30 years since they started, and actually I've been in contact with them today. Unfortunately, I'm one of the people who believe that CARE is more of a part of the problem, not the solution, because they just lack the strategic thinking and moving. Let's talk about Joe Biden, and over the last month, when we had this campaign about abandon Biden, by the way, which, by the way, CARE is not part of that campaign. CARE is joining late in this, and CARE, I think, is crippled in so many ways, as many of CARE officers are actually officials of the Democratic Party, which is a big mistake and conflict of interest. But here's the point. If you notice that over the last month or so, that we've had the incidents in Detroit where Muslim delegations refused to meet with Biden campaign, where there was very aggressive moves on Detroit Muslim voters or Muslim bloc, and applying pressure on Biden and Biden campaign, threatening him with actually withdrawing the Muslim vote in all the swing states. We have about 6 or 7 swing states where Muslims can be very decisive, including Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and others. We also saw that there was mass eviction or resignation from government employees and officials over Biden's support of the genocide in Gaza. What happened? We noticed actually that Biden has gotten even more and more emboldened over the last month in his position. The veto is just one of them, but also the arms shipments that are being mostly carried through executive orders. We saw even the rhetoric on Gaza and becoming even much more extreme than even Netanyahu's. So basically, to me, Biden is even more Zionist than the Zionists, than even the right wing in the Israeli government. So let's make no mistake about this. Biden moves on this front as if he's saying that I don't care about election, I don't care about anything. This is the top priority for me. Continuing this genocide and exterminating the people of Gaza is his top priority. He doesn't see anything else. It seems that actually the Democratic Party themselves are even complicit. We see right now, for example, those AIPAC-supported senators and congressmen. I was just watching a video for a U.S. senator or congressman when asked about the images of the remains and the bodies of the babies in Gaza, and he says, "Oh, kill them all. Let's just get rid of them all." So it seems like there is some sort of madness, bloodthirst, and criminal intent, and just so much eagerness for killing and for mayhem against Palestinians by U.S. politicians from both parties across the aisle. And I think, I was actually having conversation with many people that, how can these people get away with it without being charged in U.S. courts and the U.S. jurisdiction for inciting murder and genocide and so forth. I think we need to rise up to the occasion, because these people, obviously, politicians here and elected officials in the U.S., they only care about their position, their office. They only care about the capital or political funding, campaign funds from AIPAC and others. And I think when they start facing criminal charges and they start being actually on the in the hot seat, having to face liability, personal liability, and criminal liability for what they're doing, and for their positions of killing other human beings, I think that's only then we can see maybe turn around in terms of the political landscape. On the other hand, we see the American streets are full of people from all over, across the spectrum of religions, faiths, national origin, you name it. The protests are getting bigger and bigger every single day. We see actually that people just like Quad Pink and many other groups storming press conferences and Capitol Hill meetings and senators and congressmen and so forth, and even public officials on the city and county levels in the states. We need to continue that pressure. We need to continue escalating that pressure, and we need to be a little bit more targeted and strategic. We are in the election season right now. Primaries are coming up within about like 2 weeks on the state levels. And then we have like the general election coming up in November. I think if we organize, if we act a little bit more strategic, we can really hurt them where it counts the most. And there's a lot, just like I said, there's a lot to be done. But I think if we act a little bit more strategic, a little bit more organized and focused, and maybe like with a little bit more coordinating and networking between all the groups, I think we can make a difference, and we can actually turn things around in this 2024.
Yes, shukran for that. And Aisha, just to bring you into the discussion now, I think what is also important to understand is Russia obviously had made their submissions, and it appears as if the Russians and, while the world is also focused on Russia and Ukraine, but looking at Russia and a very, very strong statements coming through from Russia, accusing the United States of America playing for time so that it could give Israel the license to complete its inhumane plans for Gaza, to squeeze the Palestinians out of the territory. And we know what is playing out in Rafah right now as we speak.
Absolutely. I think the Russian ambassador to the UN said, even in relation to the veto, the US veto, he said it's another black page in history for the Security Council. And rightly so. Russia has, of course, there's the matter of Ukraine and Russia, but Russia has come out and they've been very brave. China has done the same thing. China has expressed disappointment, dissatisfaction with the US. And they've said that the US veto sends a message to say that's a green light to continue the slaughter. So countries are no longer taking a neutral stance, or they are not afraid to come out and, in strong dissatisfaction with the US. They are calling for an end to a genocide. They are calling it a genocide, which is what it is. And the Russian Federation also said that the international community have all recognized the rights of Palestinians to have an independent state now, for the occupation to end. So there isn't any dispute with that. It's just a matter of realizing the rights of the Palestinians now.
Yes, Aisha. And also, Marcy, is Professor Nidal alluded to in terms of Code Pink and the pressure that Code Pink is actually putting on politicians in the United States of America. He spoke about Capitol Hill. He spoke about senators as well. And just looking at Code Pink and targeting these politicians. But and we've seen a lot of footage come through on social media in terms of some of the action that Code Pink is taking. If you could just take us through, in terms of the pressure that and are politicians taking notice of what Code Pink is saying?
Well, that's a good question, and we can always work harder to ensure that they do hear us and listen to us. They're certainly paying attention to us on Capitol Hill in the sense that they either don't want to be interviewed or they hide from us. Medea Benjamin, as I mentioned before, our Code Pink co-founder, held a sit-in at the office of Hakeem Jeffries. Who is he? He is the ranking member of the House. We have the House and the Senate. Those are the elements in our Congress. And Hakeem Jeffries is the most powerful Democrat in the House. It's supposed to be the people's house, but we see them really captured. It's a captured house by the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. But Susan Sarandon, the actress, joined Medea and others to sit in. And I think that there needs to be, when we talk about a strategic focus, there needs to be a much more strategic focus on Hakeem Jeffries, because he represents Brooklyn, New York, which is majority people of color. How dare he pledge to push a supplemental war spending bill? We're already spending $886 billion on our military. He wants another $95 billion to supplement that war spending, to spend it on what? 14 billion more on weapons for Israel, to spend it on another $60 billion in continuing this war in Ukraine that has no military solution, in spending another $8 billion to further militarize East Asia for a confrontation with China. So I say, by all means, we need a lot of pressure coming from New York, coming from Brooklyn, coming from all over the country on Hakeem Jeffries, because as we know, the Republicans are dysfunctional right now in Congress and the House. The Speaker of the House, who is a Republican, a Trump supporter, said he will not bring this supplemental war spending bill that includes another $14 billion in weapons transfers for Israel, as well as a prohibition on the United States permanently ever funding UNRWA, which is the lifeline for Gaza. Mike Johnson has said he will not bring it to the floor. Why? Because the very right wing of the Republican Party, what we call the Freedom Caucus, the most vociferous supporters of Trump, do not want this bill brought to the floor unless it has a lot more in it to further militarize the border. So this is the kind of crazy dynamic we're in right now. But we say we support not bringing this bill to the floor. And so the pressure then needs to be, I think, both from the right on Mike Johnson, who has said he's not going to bring it to the floor, but to ensure that he stays with that position, as well as from the left, from Code Pink, from progressive Democrats, from third parties who are exposing the Democrats' complicity and the complicity of Hakeem Jeffries with Israeli genocide.
Yes, Marcy. And also, Professor Nidal, you and I had a discussion very, very early when this war on Gaza had taken place. And you made a statement in terms of Gaza and what it actually means for the rest of the world, and also defining what how this new world order would actually look like. And Gaza and Palestine will define a very, very different world. We see it on the ground. We've spoken at length about people coming out in the millions right across the entire world. We see support coming through from activists, from NGOs right across the entire world, but also on a diplomatic front, from what Aisha is actually saying, looking at the submissions that have been made at The Hague until now, two countries, Hungary and the United States, while the rest of the world, even on a diplomatic level, is thinking very, very differently.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Gaza now represents the pulse of the streets and the masses across the globe. Gaza right now represents the aspiration for freedom, for human dignity, for the rule of law, for everything that all the ideals that we all stand for, from whoever we are, whatever we are. The only problem that we're having right now is that the political, global, and legal structure of the world that we live in, to allow this genocide to happen and continue. But we always bid on the people, and people from the US and everywhere except for Arab countries, unfortunately, because the Arab countries, they have those governments that are actually the most or the biggest supporters of Israel. We've seen, like, for example, like Blinken making statements that actually the ones that are pushing for to continue this war and the genocide are actually those Arab governments, the ones who insist the most on it. So whenever you're talking about the official structure of the parties involved, whether it's Israeli supporters from the European American side or from the Arab dictatorship side, of course, like they all insist on this genocide. But when it comes to people in the streets everywhere, we see quite the opposite. I would never discount America and the American politics, which I think like we're way behind in terms of influencing this politics and imagining that AIPAC does have much more power than they do. Actually, I've been in conversations of like, as Marcy said, that we have the whole political scene here in the US is polarized between, these two candidates, the racist demagogue Trump and the genocidal Joe Biden. But at the same time, like we also like on the grassroots level, on the people level, I'm not even discounting Trump base. Trump base, we know that, for example, like for them, taxes is the biggest thing, and we can play on that. These taxes and billions are taken away from them and being thrown to Israel. If we educate them a little bit on what Israel is doing with that money, I'm sure that we can win over many of those people against even Trump platform on these issues. There are many other issues that we can find in common with those quote unquote conservative base, regardless of how much we agree on the issues of race or whatever else. We are at a point right now that we really need to mass the support, educate the masses, regardless to their party lines, regardless to their political views or agendas, and so forth, and try to just create the widest base possible among all the masses that we have around the world in each country, and try to take this protest level to the next level. We cannot accept the fact that we have the streets and we just surrender that people in office do not represent the pulse of the street. No, we have to make sure that actually we are creative enough to chase them wherever they are, wherever they may be. Marcy talked about, for example, like this Jeffrey thing from New York, but we've seen also like the mayor of New York, who's a loser basically, and unfortunately he's African American as well. Cracking down on the protests in New York. There's almost like daily arrest of the people protesting for Palestine in New York right now. So we need really to escalate and to refine our activism, to put more and more pressure on those politicians, and we need to take it to the next level. And I think that's what the conversation should all be, how to take to the next level to make sure that the will of the people on the streets is reflected in the decision making on every level of government.
Yes, and to bring Aisha back into the discussion, Aisha, after South Africa had presented its case at the ICJ, now there was a fair amount of disappointment in terms of the ruling, especially where it was expected that a full-blown ceasefire would be called for by the ICJ, which never happened. And now we hear the buzzword humanitarian ceasefire. Now, we can describe it as we want to. At the end of the day, we are calling for an immediate ceasefire. And is this a question of semantics? And just listening to some of the submissions, and particularly those that have been calling for the ceasefire, what do they actually mean by ceasefire? Because, we see the UN talking about humanitarian ceasefire. We see the United States of America talking about their own resolution about a humanitarian ceasefire. How relevant is this against the submissions, Aisha?
Look, I think with the South African case, especially, there was no question that the provisional measures that were implemented by the ICJ or that were handed down called for an immediate military cessation or a cessation of all military activities. And our minister, Naledi Pandor, she interpreted that as ceasefire. But say, for instance, the court didn't say, cease all military activities. Say the court said, we are calling for a ceasefire. Would that have changed anything for Israel? That's what we have to actually ask ourselves. The provisions can be handed down and the UN resolutions can be passed. And, the US will always have this veto power. That's the first problem. You have a member council with 15 members, and then you have a vote 13 in favor of a ceasefire, and one state or one member gets to veto that every single time. So irrespective of the provisional measures, if the wording had been changed on the provisional measure, Israel would have still said, well, we don't recognize this. And they actually did come out and say, when that ICJ case was brought, the genocide case, they did come out and say, we don't recognize this case, and we are not, irrespective of the outcome, we won't be complying. So I don't think that the problem is, I think it is a little bit of semantics. We can call it what we want. We need a cessation of military activities, and we need an end to the occupation, and we need the full self-determination of the Palestinian people. And whatever we're going to call it in terms of, the different legal forums and in terms of the UN Security Council, that's basically what we need. Now, in terms of this temporary ceasefire that the US is calling for, I think the main fear is that they want to call for a temporary ceasefire, release the hostages, and once the Israeli hostages are back in Israel, then they will continue to erase the Palestinian people. The military aggression will start. And we know this from every single year, especially what they do in Ramadan to the Palestinian people. They show no mercy to them during Ramadan. There's white phosphorus, and they bomb them, they kill them. They make it so difficult in the holy month. They actually wait for that to release this aggression on the people. So with the temporary ceasefire, And this is what Hamas is coming out and saying. They're saying, if it's not permanent, how can we agree to it? Because they know that a temporary ceasefire is only for the benefit of the hostage release, and it will not put them any further in recognizing the rights of the Palestinians.
Yes, Aisha. And also, Marcy, when we are looking at what is playing out, Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden and ineffective, unable to actually go up against somebody like Benjamin Netanyahu. And some are actually saying that Gaza has clearly become a genocide by veto, where America's seat in the United Nations is the main obstacle to peace, and also at the same time looking at reforming the United Nations. We know our very own Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor, has been a very, very strong advocate of reforming the United Nations for this very reason, because we are dealing with people like Benjamin Netanyahu, who has absolutely no respect for international law, a law unto himself, treats the world with complete contempt, and he says, you do what you want to, we will do what we want to.
I'm sorry, was that a question? Oh, okay. I missed the first part, but I just want to say that I think now is the time where we really need to start counting votes. And at this point, I'm not talking about Joe Biden, although I would like to abandon him, but counting votes in the United Nations, because this hearing, this 3-day hearing, or yeah, I think it's 3 days at the ICJ on the illegal Israeli occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza is an opportunity to further mobilize world opinion against Israel and its settler colonial policies. And so earlier I mentioned that under the Uniting for Peace resolution, which I think the UN passed in about 1950, it would take 2/3 of the United Nations, 193 members, 2/3 of them to override an anticipated veto of, we know it's not anticipated, the US veto on the Security Council of a ceasefire. It would take about 2/3 of them to override that, and under the Uniting for Peace resolution on the floor of the General Assembly to say, we're going to go one step beyond a call for a ceasefire. We want sanctions now. There are so many countries, I mean, not a majority of the world, certainly, but there are critical countries that are complicit in this genocide. And I'm not just talking about the United States, which of course is the chief arms exporter, transfer of weapons to Israel. But there are many other countries that are complicit. But I still think that we could have a majority of the United Nations overriding a veto of a ceasefire to impose sanctions on oil, weapons, and tech to Israel. We need to completely unmask the Arab countries. I'm talking about, even though the Queen of Jordan gave a beautifully, an eloquent denunciation of what Israel is doing in Gaza, we know that Jordan is complicit. They're allowing goods to Israel to be transported on the Jordanian highway. We know that the UAE is involved. We know that others are involved, Egypt, in constructing a land corridor. We know that the Fifth Fleet of the United States, its warships are based, the command center is in Bahrain. We know that the largest US military base is in Qatar in the Middle East, that they just recently, very quietly, under the radar, signed another 10-year agreement to house this. And we need a lot of street heat on these governments. Morocco is right in there, Not all of the Arab governments are complicit, but critical ones are. I don't know if everybody's aware that Turkey is allowing all of this oil coming from Azerbaijan to flow through Turkey, through the Ceyhan pipeline up to Israel, to eventually reach Israel. And so we need to call them out. We need to unmask this. There needs to be a lot more global pressure. But I do think, in my optimism, that we could get 129 votes at the UN General Assembly to override a ceasefire veto at the Security Council, and to go one step beyond, and to take the S in BDS, the sanctions, and impose them on Israel.
Yes, I'd just like Professor Nidal's thoughts on the behavior of Benjamin Netanyahu throughout. Yes, I see there's Professor Nidal on screen. Prof, just your thoughts, because we know that Netanyahu is under severe pressure within his own country as well. We've seen the opposition party a stinging attack on him in Israel as well. But again, this man has become a loose cannon. He's become a law unto himself with total disregard, acting with impunity. And I just need your thoughts in terms of why, from what Marcy is actually saying, that why would countries like Jordan, why would countries like Egypt, why would countries like the UAE and also Turkey actually, break that or go through, use this road corridor as well, make sure that Israel continues to sustain itself through oil and in terms of any other trade links that they have?
Yeah, let's be very, very clear here. And just like Marcy said, without the lifeline to so-called Israel by Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, and as well Egypt, of course, Israel would have not been able to continue its aggression for all the 5 months that they've been doing that. Hamas has played it right. Gaza has played it right. They know exactly how to target Israel, and this so-called Gaza envelope as the food basket of so-called Israel. But little did they know that Arabs actually are going to rush to feed the Israelis and to fuel its war machine. And Qatar is a different situation. Yes, I agree with Marcy about the US base and everything in Qatar, but you have to understand that the only reason why Qatar actually hosted that US base was to stop the Saudi invasion of Qatar at the time, about 30 years ago. We know that Saudi is basically one of the also like terrorist regimes in the region, and their incursion against its neighbors and so forth. That's a different issue to debate. The Sil and Idid U.S. military bases and the wisdom behind it and so forth. But nonetheless, Qatar has been really one of the very few countries that have been on the side of the Palestinian people. Aside from those, like from Qatar, those countries, actually the other countries are the lifeline to the genocide that's taken place in Gaza. Netanyahu actually did us a service, a great service. He exposed the so-called Israeli society. Yes, there are some protests against Netanyahu, but they're not really like that significant or as big as they were before. We see that the Israeli society, I am, by the way, I'm always engaged with quote-unquote Israeli society, even during this crisis. So I talk to people from Israel, and I always try to measure, how the Israeli pulse on this issue. And unfortunately, the impression that I got, actually people from the whole spectrum are largely supportive of that war and are against the ceasefire. So it's not really like just like the right wing, the ones who are blocking the humanitarian aid coming through Karm Abu Salim crossing and so forth. Yes, there are some people like who hate Netanyahu and the right wing with passion, but I think probably they hate Gaza more right now. And it's a sad thing to see, because you would always like to think that there are people of conscience everywhere. But I think the Israeli response, or the Israeli street response to this genocide on Gaza has been largely showing that it doesn't matter how much on the left or on the right. If you're Israeli, you're bloodthirsty for the Arab blood or Arab babies and women, and I guess that's what situation that we're dealing with right now. And of course, for this, there will be long-term repercussions once the tide shifts, and everything will be dealt with accordingly.
Yes, and also Aisha, I think just listening to what both Marcy and Professor Nidal have been saying about the Arab countries and the neighbors who have been supportive of Israel in terms of their economic cooperation. But again, what we're seeing, and from what you heard at the ICJ, now, many were even raving about Saudi Arabia and the Saudi Arabian submission at the ICJ. But it is clear that there is a total disconnect between the submission made at the ICJ and what is actually practically playing out on the ground?
Definitely. I think that, just give me 1 second. Sorry, I think I'm losing you. Okay, I think the connection's better now. There's definitely a connect between what's happening in the ICJ and what's happening on the ground, which is a big problem. And we have to now examine everything at different levels. We have to try and boycott and sanction countries where it affects them the most. If they're not going to, if they don't have a sort of moral standing, then it needs to be boycotts and sanctions and any legal measures taken in order to gain justice. And it's disappointing. It's disappointing when you look at these countries, these Arab countries, and you look at what's happening and how nobody wants to suspend the arms to Israel. Nobody wants to stop the oil flow. Nobody wants to stop the trade. But we need to use every measure possible, or we need to use every avenue possible, and people need to hold their governments accountable, and at the same time keep bringing cases to your courts and keep bringing matters to the ICJ and keep everybody busy with Palestine so that on all levels we gain justice. I think the good thing is that in these submissions, countries have not denied the genocide and countries have not denied the occupation. And that's being written, that's being put into law, it's being put into customary international law, it's becoming a part of history. And it is the start. I do firmly believe that it's the start of the end of the occupation. Once it's submitted by these countries, the next step is now to take other steps. And some countries have now suspended, like Brazil recalled the ambassador to Israel. And arms, European countries are now suspending their arms deals with Israel. So it's happening slowly. And yes, we do get disappointed over and over again because people are not doing enough. But I think there has been a big change in the views in the West. There has been a big uprising for Palestine, and it's only going to get better from here. So I'm positive that this ICJ genocide case, the advisory opinion by the ICJ, and the UN resolutions, even though they are failing, but we can see the support coming through for Palestine. This will assist us in finally getting the self-determination.
Yes, I think we've lost Aisha. Aisha, sorry, we just lost you there for a minute. You can continue.
I can hear you. Where did you have me until?
Well, until a few seconds ago.
So I just ended off by saying that I think on all levels there has been a lot of education and a big movement towards the liberation of the Palestinian people. And even though it's happening slowly, we should take every avenue that we have. So every legal avenue that we have, we need to use it. For example, the small cases that have been brought to the courts in the last few weeks, so small cases in terms of the Dutch High Court handed down the ruling to say that those F-35 fighter jet parts cannot any longer be sent to Israel because they are being used in the genocide against Gaza. That's a big win for us because before this, the Dutch government, the ICJ sits in the Netherlands and the Dutch government was sending weapons to Israel, and they can't do that now. They can't send those parts because it's a High Court ruling. And yes, they're going to appeal it, but we need to keep doing that. The next case that's coming up here is the case of Leah Rashmani, who is an IDF soldier, and she's now being prosecuted in court for war crimes. And I think the same needs to be done in South Africa. When I was at university in South Africa, people in my class, I was studying law, and people in my class used to serve in the IDF. That's completely illegal, but there was absolutely nothing being done about that. It's ridiculous when you think about it that a post-apartheid South Africa allows members to go and serve in the IDF and come back and continue studying law in the country. So there is a movement towards prosecuting 72 people currently in South Africa who have served in the IDF. And legal bodies are getting together to prosecute. So we need to keep doing that, use every avenue possible at a grassroots level, boycott, sanction, every legal avenue, keep every country busy with the self-determination of the Palestinian people.
Yes, Marcy, just looking at it, the United States in terms of what Aisha has been saying in terms of local prosecutions, and I'm sure, Code Pink has been keeping an eye on the developments in the United States of America. Have you considered some of these legal actions?
Well, I co-host with Medea Benjamin, who you showed on the screen earlier on Capitol Hill. I co-host a program called Code Pink Congress with her, where we have interviewed people with expertise on international law. And of course, Palestine Legal, the Center for Constitutional Rights in the United States, has taken their case against Israel's genocide to the courts. But even though the judges have been sympathetic and haven't denied that this is genocide or this is an illegal occupation, there's also a tendency on the part of our judges to say, this is not our jurisdiction, this is political, right? And so I think the focus in the United States has to be political as opposed to judicial. That doesn't mean that we don't support judicial efforts. Like I mentioned earlier, we have ICJ teams in Miami, in Houston, in Los Angeles, in New York, in DC, pressing for countries to support South Africa at the International Court of Justice. And my heart goes out to South Africa. My greatest respect, deepest respect, Naledi Pandor, everyone in South Africa who supports taking Israel to court at the highest level. I express my utmost gratitude. I think in the United States, in addition to support for international condemnation of Israel, we need a lot more political pressure on our members of the House, on our members of the Senate, who, as I mentioned, seem to have been captured right now by the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. But there are all sorts of, as the professor mentioned, grassroots efforts that are meaningful. And as Aisha mentioned, the Dutch court at the University of California at Davis, just a few days ago, the Student Senate passed a resolution. I think it was even more powerful than a resolution to demand that the university divest from companies profiting off of Israel's occupation. We see the American Federation of Labor coming out with, let's see, there are about 12 million members, I think. 9 million of them in 7 different national unions have put themselves on record calling for a ceasefire. We see occupations, die-ins at military contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. These are the 3, Boeing, General Dynamics, these are the main military contractors supporting Israel's genocide. And so we have protesters there. We need more, right? We need more trouble, as the professor alluded to earlier, because this has got to stop. And so I appreciate all the words that I'm hearing today of encouragement. It's not easy, right? We know it's not easy. The struggle is not easy. They don't call it struggle for nothing. But we have to continue with all the strength that we have.
Marcy, just just on that thought, the American media, and I just needed your thoughts. Is the American media, mainstream media, giving you the coverage that you deserve?
The short answer is no. There are individuals who, like Joy Reid on MSNBC, has been pretty clear about the slaughter in Gaza. By and large, those who are critical are not rehired, or their contracts are terminated. 60 Minutes just did a terrible piece on the Houthi blockade of the Red Sea, mentioning, I think, once that the Houthis wanted a ceasefire, but primarily it was an advertisement for the Fifth Fleet, as I mentioned, that's anchored in Bahrain, the United States' Fifth Fleet, that's firing on the Houthis for trying to blockade ships to Israel. So what we see is youth turning to TikTok, turning to Instagram. I don't know how much longer Instagram will be providing this kind of coverage of what's happening in Gaza. I'm hearing that they may not. But we do have TikTok. A lot of youth are on TikTok, and that's where I see the shift coming in the United States. It's because people are getting their news elsewhere, and traditional publications like the New York Times, people see the New York Times for what it is, and it is largely a stenographer for the Pentagon.
Yes, Prophet Nidal, just looking at Palestine and the future of Palestine, because this is important, because we know at some point in time this is going to blow over. But the Palestinians, we know they've been resilient well over 75 years and even longer. That they've obviously been struggling, and they've never let off in terms of their struggle. But as Aisha mentioned very early on, what is playing out in The Hague, some of the countries talking about a two-state solution. And again, we saw the arrogance of Benjamin Netanyahu, where Israel has now outrightly, they've rejected any foreign efforts even to create a Palestinian state, even after what this war ends in Gaza.
Well, I mean, it's obvious that one of the outcomes of this genocide is that nobody can coexist with such bloodthirsty, murderous, genocidal people. I won't call them nation because they're from everywhere, basically. So it's making the case easier in terms of this is a land that cannot be shared by people who do not deserve to be there. And what I mean by that, of course, all of this occupiers, aggressors, settlers, and so forth. Gaza has always been Palestine has always been the land of peace for people from all over the world, from all religions, and will continue to be as such. However, the future of Palestine is very clear. That's only going to be free from the river to the sea. This thing about so-called two-state solution, of course, it's been like fallacy and a myth for over 30 years. And you talk about right now, it's only just trying to, dilute the situation. Marcy mentioned something about social media. Let's remember that social media censorship for Facebook, Instagram is out of Tel Aviv, and the censorship of TikTok is out of Dubai. So yes, even though that they've been instrumental in terms of spreading the message and activism and so forth, I remember that my TikTok account with millions of views got shut down the second week of the genocide. I expect that my other accounts on the Instagram and Facebook, they may not be around for so long because I'm always getting flagged and censored and so forth. And I'm sure that many activists are the same. Those people, they only allow you as long as they're making money. But once your views become too annoying to them, of course, they cut you out completely. So, but nonetheless, mainstream media, of course, we know, as Marcy said, that those are mostly owned by Zionists and pro-Israelis anyway, so you do not expect them really to put anything out of substance, even though that we have every now and then on CNN, on Washington Post and New York Times, some neutral coverage, but it's very, very marginal as we speak. So we count, we go back to like what fronts that we have that we can basically count on. Whatever South Africa and many or some other countries joining in support in terms of applying pressure through the legal system. We count on governments like Brazil, like Venezuela, like other countries, as well as South Africa, and applying political pressure, as we've seen withdrawing their ambassadors, and Colombia as well. From the occupation government. We count on legal jurisdictions. I know that there's a great bias and impotence in the legal system anywhere, but we have to keep doing all the filings that we can everywhere. We had filing here in Oakland, California, a couple of weeks ago as well. So we need to make sure that we go everywhere that we can, and then lastly, as the grassroots level, just like Marcy said, this is a struggle, and struggles are usually like going uphill, basically, or against the stream. So, but we will prevail as long as people stay the course, and we're not only they're staying the course, we see them growing and getting more vigilant and more informed and educated. Gaza is paying the price for all of us, for all our inaction and for our public negligence for the past years, or many of us, and it awakened the world and awakened the human conscious to the tragedy that's been going on for over 100 years right now. And we have no doubt. I have no doubt that the future of this world, the future of a peaceful world, of humanitarian world, is going to come out of Palestine and out of Gaza in particular. Of course, Gaza is not alone, by the way, because we should not overlook what's happening, the genocide that's taking place on the West Bank as well. Palestine, once again, just like it was the beacon of light throughout history, human history, with all the religions and all the prophets and all the messages and civilization coming out of Palestine for like hundreds of thousands of years. Once again, the light at the end of the tunnel is coming out of Palestine, no matter how hard it is, even though that we have 400,000 Gazans in North Gaza starving to death as we speak, even though that we have about another 500,000 in middle of Gaza suffering without food or medicine or water, even though that we have people in Rafah who are basically being bombarded as we speak, and the scores dying almost like every hour. But we will prevail. We will definitely prevail. It's going to be hard, but we have to be prepared for the long haul, and inshallah we'll come out on top.
Well, Jazakallah for that, Prophet Nidal. I believe you've got to go, you obviously took out some extra time with us this evening. But I think what we will do is we are going to wind down now. And this, Marcy, just final thought from you.
Sure, yes. Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. And I want to invite everybody to join codepink.org. We are both a national, United States-based, but also international organization, anti-war organization, feminist-led. We have a lot of different campaigns. Our Palestine campaign is robust. I also am overseeing with our Palestine campaigner the ICJ, or World Court Campaign, to urge countries. I mean, we're at UN missions every week urging other countries to support South Africa, to issue declarations of intervention in support. And we appreciate that Nicaragua is doing so, and we hear that Bolivia will be doing so as well. We see Latin America, some of the progressive governments in Latin America, as in the vanguard, talking about Chile, Colombia, Brazil, Bolivia, Nicaragua. We want to support them as well. And we want to encourage others to join our World Court campaign and to stay with us, because as your other guest said, this is a struggle, but we can prevail if we are determined and vigilant and committed. And so we have to remember that. And I think we have to also support those, as I mentioned, those countries, but also the sectors of our economies that are pushing back. And we see in the United States pushback from the tech workers at Google, at Amazon, both of which have offices. Google has an enormous office, the Google campus in Tel Aviv, saying we don't want our tech companies to be signing contracts with the Israeli military to provide iCloud computing. So let's get out there and support those workers, support the dissidents in our labor unions who say, we don't want to support Joe Biden. We're not going to vote for him. We want a candidate who's committed to peace in the Middle East. And by all means, do join us at codepink.org.
Thank you for that, Marcy. Aisha, I know you're going to be staying on at The Hague for the next few days as well. Just some final thoughts as you look ahead, in terms of your coverage of the ICJ submissions.
Final thoughts are, we still have to hear from quite a few countries. I think that the majority of countries will echo the end to the occupation, but as Professor Nidal and Marcy both echoed, we need action on all levels. So it's all well and good to come to the ICJ and to submit legal arguments, and we will continue doing that on every forum that we have. But in addition to that, we need to fight this fight on all levels, grassroots movements, every single boycott, sanction, everything that we can do for the people on all levels. That's how we need to continue. And just to Marcy, I just wanted to commend you on the work that you do at Code Pink. You have many South African fans, and Medea Benjamin is a very well-known name. So, we are big fans on this side as well.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate your comments. And I want to ask everybody to check out my article, humbly ask, that I have posted on Common Dreams today, how the world could end Israel's genocide in Gaza, stop the arms, stop the oil, stop the tech. I unmask a lot of the country's complicity and also offer good news and hope for the way forward.
Perfect. Prophet Nidal, final thoughts from you.
I would like to thank Marcy for all the great work you guys doing at Code Pink. You've been actually a beacon of hope for people like for decades now, and I've been always following your work, and it's work that we cannot do without. I actually give Code Pink and similar group a great part of the credit for the awakening that we have on the grassroots level here in the US, and how this grassroots is turned into mobilizing where it counts the most, in press conferences, in the Congress in Washington, D.C., and so forth. We need to keep the improving, and we need to keep getting more and more creative and think out of the box. We're up against evil, and evil sometimes, they get all the resources that they need, but we have the faith, and we have the right side of history, and we have justice on our side, and doing the right thing. We will prevail. We will prevail, because of people like Code Pink, because people like South Africa, that they're always like inspiration to all of us. They just hosted the Palestinian soccer team, and we saw like the reaction of the people of South Africa coming in support of that team. So South Africa is not only at the ICJ. South Africa has always been, our big brother, big sister kind of thing to the Palestinian people. I would like to thank Aisha and all the efforts that are happening at the ICJ. We know that there is going to be the briefing that's demanded of Israel coming up soon. I'm not counting on it, but this also would remind us that how it is important to move to the General Assembly. Just like Marcy said, General Assembly, we already have it. Why we're not investing as much time in trying to pass some resolutions and bypass US vetoes, just beyond me. But I think we need to refine our work to be a little bit more targeted, a little bit more smarter in whatever we do. And inshallah, we'll see results on the ground very soon, inshallah.
Inshallah, Ameen. Jazakallah, shukran for that, Prophet Nidal Zakar, and also to you, Marcy Winograd and Aisha Vaid. We thank all of you for being part and parcel of this panel discussion in conversation with myself right here on Salam Media. All the best to all of you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, that brings us to the end of another Wednesday night with myself, Inayet Wadee, in conversation with my guest this evening, taking a look at a number of issues, the US veto in particular, Israel's contempt towards the ICJ, and we will continue at Salam Media to bring you a lot more coverage as we have done since this genocide had begun, and we will continue regardless, non-stop, relentless, and this is in fact, it's been wonderful being in your company, the listeners, the viewers as well, and looking forward to another edition, hopefully very, very soon. But for now, from myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.